the grief that we are experiencing right now in this moment isn't going to last forever. It simply is here right now in this moment because it has something to say. Hola amigos y amigas, you are now with Jocelyn y en este video vamos a platicar de grief. In this video, we are going to talk about grief. And before we get into this heart-to-heart platica with each other, I just want to acknowledge the fact that we are currently holding space with each other. We are currently exchanging energy, and I honor that. I am grateful for your presence. I am grateful for your existence. And the fact that you press play on this video tells me that you may be someone who is experiencing grief in this moment. And if you are, I want you to know that that tells me that you are a lover, you are someone who loves deeply, because grief wouldn't exist if love didn't exist. And I want you to acknowledge that in yourself as well. And I want you to know that love is never a waste of time. Love is beautiful, whether it was acknowledged by someone else or something else or not, whether or not it was valued by someone else or something else or not, your love is beautiful. It is divine. It is a very powerful force that should be embraced and given thanks to, because love is just such a force and such a vibration that is really just so genuinely powerful and human. So I want you to acknowledge that within yourself and know that, hey, like, love is present within you. And I'm like, hug yourself and hold yourself. And if you feel uncomfortable doing that and that's weird to you, I understand. That is definitely a self-soothing practice that I do with myself, is like hugging myself sometimes when I feel like I need that embrace, when I need that self-love and that self-care, and really just having that pep talk with me. And that is something that we're going to get into when we talk about, coping with grief and acknowledging grief and holding space for grief. And what does that look like? I think it's so important to have this conversation, this platica about grief, because I feel like so many people are experiencing grief in this moment, subconsciously or consciously, whether they are or you are acknowledging it or not. I mean, you obviously are acknowledging it because you're watching this video. And I think, again, it's so beautiful that you are trying to understand how you can cope with your grief and coexist with your grief. And, emotions come and go. And the grief that we are experiencing right now in this moment isn't going to last forever. It simply is here right now in this moment because it has something to say. And there's a few acknowledgements that I'm going to share with you that I personally have acknowledged when it comes to emotions, when it comes to grief, that have helped me heal and have helped me develop a healthy relationship with my emotions. And one of those acknowledgements is that feelings come and go, that feelings are temporary. And when they come knocking on your door, it is because they have something to say. So when grief, when sadness, when anger, when frustration, when and all the other beautiful emotions like joy and celebration and enlightenment come knocking on my door, I open the door and I let them in, and I make some tea and I make some cookies. If we're hungry, if it's going to be a long visit, we get a little settled, I clean things up. And I allow them in and I listen. And that is really truly the way into healing from and by your emotions. That is the way in which I feel so many people should be embracing their emotions, is by seeing them as tools, seeing them as a gateway to yourself, to connecting deeper with yourself, and also connecting deeper with the Most High, with Source, with the divine. Your emotions have something to say, and in this case, our grief. And I say our because I myself right now am experiencing grief, and I'm grateful to be in a mental and energetic and heart space to have the capacity to talk about it while I am experiencing it. But in this case, grief is telling us that there is some sadness, and there is loss, and there is pain. And ask yourself that question whenever any emotion comes up. And I'm just gonna, stick on the topic of grief, but feel free to relate this to any other emotion that you may be experiencing. But ask yourself, what is my grief trying to tell me? And to give you an example, a real life example, I think what triggered me recently was Valentine's Day. And I also started watching This Is Us, and I feel like it's such a beautiful show, and it touches on so many different life topics, but it has been triggering for me, and it has made certain experiences that I've experienced that I'm still healing from resurface, and naturally emotions tied to those experiences are also resurfacing. And I'm still learning, because I am human and it takes time. Like, this healing self-work journey takes time, but I am still learning how to really, truly, genuinely hold space for my emotions, hold a safe space for my emotions, for my grief. And yesterday I was like trying to get work done. I just could not focus. And after spending hours of trying to force myself to sit there and work and not really getting anywhere, I eventually just had to stop and sit there with myself, take a few deep breaths, and I came to the acknowledgement, to the conclusion, to the root of the cause, and the fact that I am feeling sad. I sat there and realized, and yes, I do have conversations with myself. I do talk to myself, and I think it is actually a very healthy thing to do, to have conversations with yourself. And if you're in a safe space to where you feel comfortable to talk out loud, do so, because anything that gives you the opportunity to get out of your mind and let that energy flow, because emotions are energy, okay? And on that note, no emotion, in my opinion, is good or bad. It's all just energy, and it's all just a part of the human experience. And that's one reason why I love embracing all emotions, and I feel grateful to allow myself to really feel into things, because it is a part of the human experience. And in allowing yourself to feel fully, you are allowing yourself to experience life fully. But I sat there with myself and I was like, Joss, you're feeling sad. Like, that is what is visiting you right now. And you need to acknowledge it. And, you know, because feelings do come and go, you can go weeks feeling totally fine and healed and in your element and in your groove and in your flow, and then all of a sudden something can happen and unexpectedly grief will visit or sadness will visit, and that's normal. Okay, like, that is normal, and that is something to accept. As much as people say that time heals all, and I do believe that, I also believe it is very true that acceptance heals. And acceptance is often the first step towards healing and towards growth and towards enlightenment and towards really truly loving self and caring for self, is accepting that, okay, right now I am not okay in this moment, and it is okay to not be okay in this moment. Right now I am grieving, and there is validation in the reason as to why I am grieving. And that is another thing that is really, really helpful, is not only asking yourself, what is my grief trying to tell me? Why is it, like, why is it knocking on my door right now? Where is it coming from? And in this case, like I mentioned, it's a mixture of this show, and it's a mixture of um, Valentine's Day that popped up, and thinking about relationships and all of that. And you know that's another thing too, is your emotions are going to arise through things that you may not expect. Sometimes it can come through a song, sometimes it can come through a conversation, it can come through a place, a scent, you know. And again, the reason why I'm just acknowledging that in this conversation is for you to know that that's normal, and that's just a part of life. And what is also very helpful, to bring it back to where I was going, is self-validation. So when I finally, stopped trying to force myself to work and wasn't getting anywhere hours later, I was like, you know what? I am not getting anywhere with work right now. And that's obviously because I'm trying to shove these feelings away that are really trying to show up and tell me something right now. And the only way that I'm going to get through this and journey through this experience in a healthy way is by holding a safe space for them. So I closed my laptop, and I do feel very grateful to be able to do that and have that freedom to take a step back. And I am wishing that freedom on you. Genuinely, we all deserve to have that freedom to practice self-care when self-care is needed. But I closed my laptop and I took deep breaths, and I acknowledged that, okay, I'm feeling sadness right now. I'm grieving right now. And this is something that has been building up in the past week, in the past few days. Since last weekend, it's like been building up. And I think because I have been trying to, do the runaround of like, no, like I have things to do, like sadness, get out of the way. I have to get work done. um, it was building up. And when I sat with myself and I really thought about this grief and this sadness, I realized, like, wow, Joss, you are grieving right now, and you have all the reason in the world to be grieving right now and to feel sad right now, because you lost your grandmother just a few weeks ago, just a few months ago. You have gone through so many unprecedented shifts in your life in the past few months. You got COVID. You are going through so many different kinds of breakups in your life right now. And of course, you're going to feel sad. Of course, you're going to feel grief. You're going through so many endings. And I feel like so many of us can relate to this feeling of like being in this season, this stage, this phase of transition of like letting go of what is no longer and who you are no longer, but also stepping into this new life, this new self, and kind of being in that awkward transitional phase in between where you're not completely who you were, but you're also not completely who you are becoming. And there is grief in that transition because you're shedding a part of you and a part of your life. And like I mentioned earlier in this video, grief and sadness and pain and hurt and frustration and anger wouldn't be present if love wasn't present. So if this shedding of self is happening, it's like we're also shedding parts that we love. And all of these things, all of these acknowledgments, I feel are just so necessary for our healing and our coping and our holding safe space for self and our emotions, and not being afraid of them, or being afraid of them and not allowing the fear to stop you from journeying alongside and with and through the emotions that come up in your life whenever it is that they come up. I remember when, I lost my father almost 10 years ago. Wow, this summer is going to be 10 years. I just realized that. I never went through a phase where I just had like a complete breakdown, or I was like depressed for a long period of time, or sad for a long period of time. And for so many years, that bothered me because it made me feel like I just kind of dismissed my father's loss and never really acknowledged it. And I think I spent so many years being hard on myself, trying to figure out, like, why am I not grieving the way that the movies show you that you should grieve, or the way that, songs or other people happen to grieve. And when I realized that, one, grief doesn't look the same on everybody, and two, grief isn't necessarily something that you just get over. It's not something where it's like you go through a week of depression or sadness and then you're done, and then your grief is gone, and then you're over it and you're healed, and that's it. When I realized that, my grief doesn't necessarily have to have a deadline or like an end point or a destination. When I realized that my grief simply looks different, and that's okay, and that is normal, that helped me stop being so hard on myself when it came to coping my father's loss. And when it comes to experiences like that, your sadness and your grief is going to be a part of the rest of your life. And I say that because, when I think about the loss of my father, and I think about all the life experiences I have yet to live, like when I get married and not being able to walk down the aisle with my dad, I think about the fact that I am going to experience grief and sadness in that moment. When I think about when I have kids and they're not going to have a grandfather, on my side, they're not going to get to know my dad. I know that I'm going to experience grief. Grief is going to visit me in those moments. And it's acknowledging that, life is full of experiences and new experiences. And, when we love someone so deeply and have a whole life ahead of us to continue living without them, it's only natural that certain experiences are going to make grief and sadness and frustration and pain to resurface. And again, it's the acceptance of the fact that feelings are going to come when they come and they're going to go when they go. And when you allow yourself to do that and to journey with your emotions in that way, I promise you that even though right now in this moment, feeling grief and sadness may be so uncomfortable and may be something that you wish you didn't have to feel right now. I wish that I didn't have to be grieving or feel sad or feel awkward or just feel like not myself, or like I can't focus. Like, I really wish I was not feeling those feelings right now, because I have so much to do and so much to get done. And just last week I was feeling so inspired and was, gonna do all of these things this week and had all these plans. And it's life, y'all. It's life. And we don't necessarily have the power to pick and choose when the grief is going to come up, like when it is most convenient for us. And granted, you can do some delegation, if grief happens to arrive in the middle of a conference call and, you have to keep your composure in that moment and then hold a safe space for yourself later. That's a different story. But in regards to the bigger picture, had I just tried to continue to work and get work done, but I wasn't really all there and I couldn't focus and I was trying to force myself, like, it's not going to make you feel any better. I wasn't going to feel any better forcing myself to do something when I obviously wasn't right, And I don't know if I already mentioned this earlier in this video, but I have lived enough life to know that suppressing my emotions and sweeping them under the rug is not a solution. It is like putting a Band-Aid on a putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone is what it is. It's still going to be broken because you didn't give it the healing and the attention and the care that it needed. I have like a few notes here written down. But I feel like I touched on everything. It really is truly just acknowledging the emotions when they come, acknowledging the fact that love is the common denominator in every feeling, acknowledging that we hurt because we do love deeply. Again, like that love is present and is never something that you should regret or be angry at. Like the other day I was thinking to myself, as much as I have loved in my life and experienced my love not being valued the way that it should be valued, my love not being honored the way that it should be honored, my love often leaving me in very, very vulnerable spaces, I love the way that I love. I love it so much. I think it is so beautiful and it is so special. And I refuse to allow anything or anyone to change the way that I love unless it is expanding it. Whew, get some snaps on that. But really though, and I find that beauty in you too, is like, please, don't allow anything or anyone to change the way that you love, because the way that you love is beautiful. And grief, there's just no right or wrong way. There's no right or wrong way. Sometimes grief coexists with joy. Sometimes it coexists with celebration. Sometimes grief looks like crying. Sometimes grief looks like anger, looks like really needing to express what is on your mind, whether it's through a conversation with a loved one, a conversation with yourself, a conversation on paper in your journal. Sometimes grief looks like really needing solitude, just not only allowing grief to come when it comes, but allowing it to show up in the way that it shows up. For me, grief this week, one night, by one night I mean last night, it looked like crying my eyes out. I was crying so much. And when you want to cry, cry. And I promise you that eventually you're gonna either be so tired or you're not gonna have any more tears to cry. And when it comes up again, let it come up again. And that applies to everything. And I think it is important to note that under your grief, under your pain, under your hurt, under your sadness, under your anger, under your frustration, you are alive and well. Under your grief, you are alive and well. Okay? And as much as I encourage holding space for your emotions and not forcing a deadline on your grief, not forcing it to look any which way, or for it to last for however long. Acknowledging that under it all, you are alive and you are well and you are love. And it is not all of you. It is just a part of you in this moment. And having that balance of and that self-accountability and that boundary with yourself in not letting any of this be an excuse to stay in it any longer than it needs to be. And you will know, like, strengthen your intuition, strengthen your inner knowing. And you do so by connecting deeply with yourself, by these practices of self-care and self-love. But it is important to not drown in it. There is a difference between between your grief knocking on your door, you opening it, greeting it softly, friendly, allowing it in gracefully, making yourself some tea, making some tea for your grief, having a healthy conversation, and having the same boundaries that you would with grief as you would with someone who overstayed their visit, Like, think of it in that way, in that light of, this is your home, your body, your being is your home, your temple, and you open the door for your emotions and you let them in a friendly way, and you have a conversation and you get to know each other, and knowing when it is that it is overstaying its visit and when it is trying to overpower you, be grounded, be centered. And I there's so much more that I can touch on that, but look at it in that way. And I just hope that this video has helped you in some way, in acknowledging your grief and any other emotion that you may be experiencing, and knowing that you are not alone, knowing that there, again, isn't necessarily a right or wrong way. It doesn't necessarily have to have a deadline. It doesn't have to look any which way. And it is very human. And don't be hard on yourself. Journey with grace, journey with love. And I am so grateful for myself. Like, I love, again, how I love. And even though sometimes things didn't go the way that I wanted them to, even though loving deeply sometimes will lead me to pain because death happens, it is all life. It is all being human. And I hope you find solace in that. I hope you find peace in that. I hope you found clarity in this Platica, in this heart-to-heart conversation. And if you watch this whole video, I appreciate you listening to me and holding space for me. And I'm sure that once I end this video, I'm going to think of other things. But I think I shared enough tools, and it really is all about acceptance and acknowledgement and safe space. And allowing, the healing to happen.